Rachel Dempsey, welcome to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thank you so much, Mark. I've been excited to do this.
And you've been promoting this on social media, so I think you're you're officially engaged.
I'm trying to practice what I'm preaching.
Yeah, that's great. Well, before we dive into your excellent blog and your thoughts about social media, which I thought was thought-provoking, you really just took a personal approach toward it and talked about your own journey into the world of social media as a writer. Let's just lay the land here a little bit. Tell us who you are. Tell us about your background and your writing as well.
Absolutely. So I grew up in North Dakota, in a small town, and there were not a lot of arts in the community where I grew up. They did have a decent kind of summer stock option for teens, but we actually moved away before I was old enough to do that. So in my formative years, I had to sort of create my own art and my own artistic opportunities. So I have been writing and directing plays since I was about 8 years old, in my basement, much to the chagrin of my younger siblings, who were always my reluctant cast and crew. And I think my parents were indulgent, but maybe by the time I had some other audience, they were happy. So I'm a singer as well, and I did a lot of vocal performance, both solo work, musical theater, and choir growing up all the way through until now. I also do still sing professionally. But I didn't kind of bring those worlds together. I always loved to write and I always loved to perform, but I didn't really bring those worlds together until late high school and into college. So I went to NYU as an undergraduate. I went to Tisch, and I was a double major, which was kind of frowned upon, but I did it anyway. So I was part of the conservatory program in the BFA program for drama, and I got to study method acting at the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute.
Wow.
Which actually, the more I write, the more I think this is so applicable in ways that I didn't even think about, certainly not then. And I also studied at the Playwrights Horizons Theater School. And then I worked professionally in theater in Washington, D.C. for 13 years. I worked in children's theater. I wrote 10 original musicals for kids, teens, adults.
Wow.
And the last 5 years that I was in DC, let me go back. I did get a master's in journalism in there. I went to Georgetown and got my master's in journalism. Kind of just feeling it out, seeing what other writing opportunities might be out there. And I got really interested in videography, which I very quickly learned is not a skill that you can just dabble in and kind of fall out and then jump back in. It's changing so quickly. But I'm still grateful that I had that experience. I think what that's done is sort of train my eye as a writer, the videography piece. But the last 5 years in DC, I worked for an amazing theater organization called ArtStream that supports adult actors with disabilities, and that can be physical disabilities, cognitive disabilities. And we would have auditions each year and create collaboratively an original musical in 6 months and then produce it.
Wow.
And so I understand the deadlines that a journalist works under, even if I never did actually work in that field.
Yeah. Wow. There's a theater troupe in Aurora that does focuses on the disabled community. I can't come up with the name of it, but yeah, that's really.
I know Family in
Denver.
The one.
That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Wow, I have so many questions already. So let's go back to the early days of directing theater in your basement. We're talking more than skits. We're talking plays with multiple.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. There were special effects that was pretty much just my brother flicking the lights on and off. We did a lot of puppet theater with dolls or action figures because there were only 3 of us, and often the story was epic and it had many, many characters. So we had to use dolls as additional actors. The winters in North Dakota are long and dark.
Yeah, wow.
So we had to kind of create our own fun in the basement.
What part of North Dakota was this?
outside of Bismarck.
Ah, and do you have any idea? I mean, it sounded like you just had a natural drive toward the arts and towards storytelling. Did you have siblings who, yeah, you mentioned siblings already, but did they have that same drive, or was it just you?
Just me. I was the
Yeah.
weirdo in my family.
Yeah.
My family, as the years went on, I think appreciated more and more kind of what I was doing. But they're readers,
Yeah.
and they, each in their own right, have done some writing, mostly speech writing or technical writing. But the artistic piece is
Yeah.
something they kind of tolerate and celebrate, but are like, I don't really understand what you're doing there.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. Very cool. Well, just quickly, we want to get to the main topic here, but just quickly getting through New York and all that, did you ever encounter anybody we would know, somebody who went on to fame and stardom?
Absolutely. Bryce Dallas Howard, Ron Howard's daughter, was actually in my graduating class. So I had some kind of intro to tech theater classes with her and whatnot. And I could brag about all the awesome things my former classmates are doing, but maybe I'll have to do that another time.
Yeah. Did you think you wanted to maybe go into film or stage theater, and was that a possibility at any point?
It was, yeah. And the thing that I really loved about my years with ArtStream was that I also got to perform on stage, which is sometimes challenging, and it was, as the writer and the director, to also perform, but that was a pretty special, unique experience. But pretty early on in my studies at NYU, I figured out that I was not in my own head and in my own body as much as I should have been as an actor. I was very much watching from the outside, critiquing what was going on stage. Oh, I would have made a different choice. Oh, so that bossy older sister and director in me came out and said, I think you better direct.
Because you really need to be in the moment to be good. You have to let all that stuff go. Wow. And did you work in any of the well-known theaters in Washington, D.C.? Because there's some beautiful theaters there.
I did. I worked at Studio Theater near McPherson. I was actually their literary assistant for a while. And then I worked at one of the premier children's theaters in the country, Imagination Stage in Bethesda. And then I ended up at ArtStream for the last 5 years.
Oh, that's great. All right. And then when did you actually start on the fiction side, writing in that mode?
Like outside of playwriting.
Yeah.
When we moved to Colorado, so that's 5 years ago now, coming up on 5 years. I have 3 daughters, and we drove, my husband and 2 daughters, and I drove from Maryland to Colorado when I was 8 months pregnant with my 3rd daughter. So it was a very long drive. Very long.
Either a very long drive or a very fast drive going 120 miles an hour.
Lots of stops. But we got here. We wanted to be closer to family. We both have family out here. And we're kind of looking for some more support with a growing family. And so I landed here in Denver, and I knew the Denver of my high school years because I did live here for 2.5 years when I was in high school. But a lot had changed, and I sort of felt like I was just plunked down into this world that I no longer recognized, and trying to balance 3 kids and my husband's aging parents, and just a lot. And I found that writing was therapeutic and a way to kind of create on my own terms. That I'm now at the point where I'm like, I think I might be ready for some more deadlines. But in the beginning, the absence of deadlines and pressure was helpful because as a mom of 3 kids, I just never knew when I was going to have time. And that was true in the pandemic as well. So
right.
It ended up being a really good fit.
And do you write in a certain genre?
Rocky Mountain fiction writers and Lighthouse have both sort of helped me figure that out. I have more and more gravitated towards dark fiction, whether that's, I just finished a dark fantasy short story, and I'm dabbling with gothic kind of horror, but kept getting critique after critique after critique. Wow, this is dark. This is really dark. And so as opposed to trying to say, oh, this is mainstream with some dark, I think I might be ready to just say it's dark.
Just declare and go. That's great. Wow. And you recently, I know you finaled in the Colorado Gold Rush contest, the one that ends up at the conference. But well, tell me more. I know you finaled. Did you win?
I did. So I finaled 2 or 3 years ago with one piece, and then I won this last year with a different piece actually, and both are still kind of in the works, but they're both dark.
Yeah.
But that actually, if I may, unless you had a different question to segue, that's a perfect segue because
yes. We like to say, I'm not the segue king. I need segue help.
Absolutely. So I won that in September, and I had recently won first prize in a Denver Women's Press Club contest as well. And because of the pandemic, neither of those award ceremonies was able to take place. So that was disappointing. And that was part of the impetus to finally bite the bullet and get on social media, because that was a way to still feel connected and like I could celebrate and network with my fellow writers in a time when it felt like I was just missing out on a lot of things.
Okay, so that does set it all up. Let's go back though. Why the reluctance? I think in the blog post, you talked about that initial kind of just hesitancy to dive into that whole world.
Absolutely. So I feel like I'm finally at the point in my adult life where I can look back and really examine a lot of trauma that happened in my teen years that was really a huge part of why I was reluctant. And that could be on the more benign side of, worrying about how I would appear to people that used to know me, to kind of the more, wondering if people that were not safe from my past might resurface. And this is something that I'm hoping will continue to be a dialogue in a lot of communities, not just writing communities, particularly where women are concerned. I think that sometimes we assume reasons why people aren't engaged and might not stop to take into account that there might be some real safety issues there. I think we talk about it with where kids are concerned, that we feel like we want our kids to be safe online, but I think some adults, in fact, I know they are because I've spoken with some who have those same concerns. So.
It's a big issue. I mean, it's a really big issue. And I guess what I'm hearing is just a sense that you wanted to maintain some privacy, and that getting into social media is going to put yourself out there and create a presence where you feel like you might be attracting some folks you really don't want to even ever hear from again.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. I'm just trying to hear. I want to make sure I heard what you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it kind of went both ways. I think I was learning about myself that boundaries were a struggle for me, that I was always wanting to people please and not upset anybody, to the point where it was hard for me to cut off kind of toxic interactions. And I had to learn how to set those boundaries up so that I could negotiate, this is an interaction that is safe and healthy, and this is not. And I just didn't have those skills until fairly recently.
So how long ago did you start wading into social media, and what channels did you open?
It's actually very recent. I just got on Twitter this past December, and I got on Instagram, I think just a couple of months before that, and then started writing for the blog, for the RMFW blog.
Right.
And I mentioned in the blog post that kind of interacting across those platforms helped me realize that it actually is a much smaller world than I thought. I didn't have to be on there very long before I'd hear the same name pop up. Oh, I've taken a webinar with that person, or I've taken a class with that person. I've read that person's work and loved it. I've listened to that podcast, and the same names kept circling around,
Right.
Which was very encouraging and made it a lot less intimidating.
Right. What has your experience been? Have you, first of all, have any of the folks you hoped weren't going to surface? I hope they haven't surfaced.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I'll throw out a little benign example. I had a graduate school class where we were asked to create a blog, and I did that. And then I tried to argue that I did not want it to go live. And my instructor sort of, okay, Rachel, the whole point of this is that it needs to go live and you need to interact. And so I did. And sure enough, a very nice person from my past found it almost within days. And it, as harmless as he was, it just made me go, oh, see, I knew this was a thing. I knew that I didn't want to go there. So it wasn't without foundation that I sort of had those concerns.
Yeah.
But interestingly, I have not had a repeat of that experience.
Right.
And I feel like I now would be better equipped to deal with it if it did happen. And I am slowly building up a community of really supportive, really positive people that feels like, kind of a protective little tribe. So, yeah.
That's good. That's great. You're not on Facebook. You're just doing Twitter and Instagram.
Correct. My husband actually is on Facebook, so I am able to sort of sneak on there and, check up on relatives and friends that we have in common. So I almost felt like a lot of that would just be redundant. It would be more pictures of our kids, and he's already doing a really good job with that.
Right.
And I did have some feedback from quite a few writers. I don't know, maybe you would have a different experience, who said that to them doesn't feel as interactive in terms of promoting your own work or others' work, that Bookstagram and Twitter just maybe serve an author's purposes more specifically than Facebook.
Yeah. Well, that's a really interesting question. I was just about to ask you what your ultimate reason for being on social media is. I mean, I think that's always what I ask people when they say, should I open a Twitter account or open a Facebook page to promote my book as opposed to a personal page? And that's if you do have a finished book and you're on Facebook, you can open a business page, which is just all about your book. And that functions differently than your own personal page. So that's nice to have. And you can do a lot of things with that. And I think with whatever it is, 800 or 900 million people on Facebook, you can find your audience of people who like, say, dark fiction. You can find those people, and just as you can on Twitter and on Instagram and the subset of Bookstagram. And I'm no expert. I just have been on Twitter, I think now for 10 years, and Facebook for equally as long, if not longer. And I don't really know the difference in terms of finding readers, but I'm not necessarily on Twitter and Facebook to sell my book. I mean, that's sort of the side little thing that might happen. I'm there to, touch base with the writers, like your friends that you've met already on social media. Some of my social media friends are people I've never met in person, but we have so many like interests that it's really fun to see what are they thinking every day? What are they tweeting? What are they concerned about? Good joke tellers, good critical insights, or cynical people are out there that I just like getting that kind of input in my head. So I don't know about the big difference between Facebook and Twitter in terms of selling yourself, but if you're trying to find readers, you can definitely go out there and do that. And keep mentioning the fact that you've got a book out there and that it's might be of interest to somebody with your particular, genre. So.
Well, and you asked about the kind of the why now question.
Right.
I think in addition to sort of pushing back against the isolation of this past pandemic year, I did kind of echo what you said. I did feel compelled to participate in the community. And I was thinking about that really was me kind of reclaiming my identity as an artist, because I think you can be a writer. You're a writer when you put words down on the page, and you can be an author when you publish a novel. But my personal definition of the difference between that and an artist is not some kind of elitist literary distinction. Really has more to do with art isn't really art until you elicit emotional response and until you have an interaction with an audience, unless you're talking about a specific niche of art where it's really, you're reflecting on your own art and you're the audience and the artist, and that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But as a performance artist, I'm very interested in that engagement with and interaction with your audience. And I think that's where all of the social media comes into play, is if I'm not putting my writing out in a vacuum. I want to speak to the time. I want to touch readers where they are. And how can I know where they are if I'm not engaged in this way that so many people are engaged in?
That is a great point. That's a topic for a future blog post, Rachel. I think that's a really, really interesting point. Yeah. And I think that's just being in these channels. To your point about the pandemic and isolation, having that interaction, especially in the last 14 months or so, has been even more precious and more valuable. And I kind of wonder in the future, say you were to publish a novel in a year or so, the world of getting out there into the bookstores and doing tours and all that kind of stuff, I wonder how much this will move to the virtual side, where we're really, we were already before the pandemic, so much marketing was online, blogs and podcasts and blah, 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 where we're not actually going face to face, but having these other channels open as we get back to quote unquote normal, I think it's going to be there, and we may as well get kind of good at it, and you're still going to get that reaction you're looking for.
I think that's a very, very true assessment, that
Yeah.
if we can do it this way and it's more affordable and it's more accessible for a lot of folks, then why would we not continue it?
Yeah.
I also think that opens up channels to be connected to people from more and more diverse backgrounds and all around the world. And that's another reason that I did feel compelled to join. As that little girl growing up in North Dakota, I was just so hungry for, stimulus from different brains and different parts of the world. And that was me as an adult going, I live in such a small world if I just go from my house to my daughter's school to my conference, as opposed to the social media world, as scary as that can be, being such a big place in some ways, some regards, and really having a deep desire to establish a kind of reciprocity with other artists, because I didn't want to wait until I had something to promote. And that, as a reader, that gets me a little bit when I don't see someone engaging until it's buy my book. I have more respect and I'm more invested in the writers who are engaged with other writers and other artists and musicians, and that they're there to support each other, even when they're not feeling particularly sparkly. They can take that time to shine the light on someone else until it's their turn again.
Exactly. That's great. Yep. Do you commit a certain amount of time every day to jumping on social media? Are you making it a regular thing? Is it hard for you to say, oh yeah, today I've got to spend 20 minutes on Twitter or anything like that?
I probably do need to be more intentional about it, almost the way I am about exercise or anything. Again, as a parent with 3 young-ish children, sometimes I can make a plan, and we know what happens to the best made plans.
Yeah.
So sometimes it is I'm standing here, and while I'm waiting to flip the chicken for dinner, I can see what's on Twitter and tweet back really fast. And that might have to be enough for right now. Mm-hmm. I've also heard a lot of writers and people of all different professions talk about needing to set limits too, so that it's
Yep.
not taking away from their
Right.
actual artistic creative
Yeah.
time. So
Yep.
I'm probably that's a future goal of mine.
Yeah. Well, one thing I always like to mention about Twitter, and it's a really simple function on there about lists. And if you don't know about lists, you can really control Twitter and organize your friends in groups that you can just see immediately without going to the big hurricane of junk that's out there and will land in your feed. You can just go to and create lists of your various topics, whether it's dark fantasy writers or just RMFW friends or whatever it might be, and then just quickly go on there, and it's much more focused conversation. So, and there's a million instructions out there, but a lot of people don't know about lists on Twitter, and it's just such a great way to focus your conversations. So
yeah, well, in the spirit of candidness, it's not just social media that still kind of makes me a little anxious. Technology in general is not my forte. So I always need a little extra push to take advantage of all the tricks. So I appreciate that motivation.
Yeah. Very good. Well, kind of as we're winding down here, what is the status of your works in progress then? Are they, what's happening? I don't even think we got a working title out of any of these projects you've got underway.
Yes. So I did just finish a short story that I'm pretty excited about. And that's the first time I've ever tried short story writing. So that was very liberating to be able to say, okay, that's done.
Are you submitting it to the anthology?
I am, yes.
All right.
So I committed to submitting and I'm submitting, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it. Just give us the flavor of it and the title.
Well, am I allowed to do that? Because then does somebody know that I wrote it?
Oh, good point. Excellent point. See, you're absolutely right. No, keep it to yourself. Yeah,
It's dark. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. That doesn't.
And
there will be other dark ones, so you're not alone there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it follows some of the other themes that I'm interested in. I am tackling a novel. So I've been in the past, I've been a bit of a pantser. And I think I realized that that's been to my own detriment. I know that works for a lot of folks.
It's the only way to go.
People are so passionate about this.
Yeah.
So I'm trying a project now where I'm using some more structure. I'm not outlining like a mad person. I mean, that also works for some people, but so I'm trying to kind of blend and see how that works out. And it's a ghost story and it's got some historical elements, which I always thought I'm not a historical fiction writer, but this has a little bit of that, some shifting timelines, and I'm pretty excited about it. I'm hoping to be able to visit the site this summer.
Colorado based?
Yes.
Mountains?
Yes. Yeah.
Around Crested Butte, Aspen.
Closer to Aspen, yep, in Independence.
Yeah. Okay. Still don't have a working title out of any of these things from you, though. You've been very reluctant to share these.
So I think the one I'm working on right now, I'm leaning towards either A Spirit of Independence, because it is about a spectral presence, but also kind of a play on that, a spirit of independence in the protagonist.
Yeah.
That's kind of her wound that she needs to heal from. And that's a theme that I'm exploring a lot in my nonfiction writing, fiction writing, all kinds of things. This women looking for a way to achieve independence without costing their personal relationships. I've seen that happen, especially in the last year, where that balance seems to be very difficult to achieve. So I'm very interested in that.
So you really seem like you have developed an ability to understand yourself and explore yourself and pull from yourself.
I hope so. I think that may have been more than anything else what was getting in my way. Was I had to dig down to the nugget of, this is what you're really trying to explore. This is the story that you really need to share and, dig at. So I think maybe I finally got there.
Yeah. Wow. And this, really curious about how you must be in the process of writing and still probably echoing off or bouncing off some of your lessons from theater.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That I'm going to explore the method acting connection a lot more. I've got another friend who has finished a memoir and has drawn on that experience a lot. It's a memoir about child loss, and so that kind of deep, visceral, emotional responses. And so I'm having conversations with her about how writing can really be informed by this exploration of the senses and connecting it to emotional response. And also learning, and that probably will be a future podcast as well, which is really kind of what I hope people would take away from this past blog post, was that there's a way to do this safely, and that sometimes we don't prioritize that enough.
Yeah.
That it can be very, social media and exploring trauma and all of this can be very triggering, and that we as writers need to talk about that more and support each other through it, and kind of as a community build tools for best practices to keep each other healthy.
Yeah, that's great. Well, before I ask my traditional last question about you just passing along the name of a book or a writer or something like that, I also want to ask you just to pass along any favorite playwrights, or maybe you just to give us a sense of who you are, maybe mention a few of your favorite plays.
That's an excellent question. Well, in the spirit of darkness, I guess one of my favorite musicals has always been Sweeney Todd.
Oh boy.
And I tried to make my daughter watch it, and I remembered kind of how dark it was, and it went there, and I sort of went, I looked at her and I said, "Do you want to watch this?" And she's 13. She looks at me. She says, "No." I was like, "That's okay. We can turn this off. We'll wait on this."
Go ahead.
She may never be ready to watch that. So far, my children are not interested in the dark at all. So
there was a great production of that, the DCPA, about 5 or 6 years ago. It was fabulous. It was fabulous. Love that show.
I do actually, on a slightly lighter note, but not really. Dear Evan Hansen is one of my favorites to come out in the more recent. Treat yourself to that one. It's about a school, and there's one of the students commit suicide, and just how that community is grieving, and actually it's a lot about social media and how that both helps people process, but also really kind of distorts what's happening. And I'll go and correct myself. I used the word commit, and I don't use that word anymore. That was a habit, because I'm part of a parent coalition that's working to kind of decriminalize how we talk about loss of life through suicide. So that was a slip up there. I apologize.
Oh, well, that's thank you. Yeah. Wow. Very good. And now for the last question, just asking you to sort of mention a writer or anybody you want to sort of pass along a reference to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So another benefit of getting engaged on social media has been, I've been exposed to so many webinars and workshops and online course offerings that I wouldn't have been aware of, and I would not have been able to attend because I don't live downtown. I live in the suburbs of Denver, and I have 3 kids. And so being able to do these things virtually has in some ways been really great. And one of the authors and instructors that I worked with at Lighthouse, Hillary Leftwich, has founded a new author services company called Alchemy Author Services. And she describes it as an A to Z service, and they do workshops for all kinds of writers, but she really wanted to found an organization that would support writers who can't afford a traditional MFA program or some of these more expensive writers retreats. And her instructors are a really diverse group of talented, passionate instructors, and they go through some very deep and meaningful training with her before they work in Alchemy. And it's, I I want to make sure I get it right. It's inspired by, or it's based on Felicia Rose Chavez's anti-racist workshop model. So she's doing some really cool stuff there. And future course offerings include purpose-driven writing and how to generate great titles for your work. And I'm actually currently in one of her courses taught by Brenda Tolian, and it's called Dark Fiction. So she really kind of inspired me to go there with my short story. So I've already gained a lot from this new author services company, and I hope that all the RMFW folks, if they're looking for just another tool in their author toolkit, to check out alchemyauthorservices.com. And Hillary Leftwich is also on Instagram, on Twitter, under her own name, and then Alchemy Author Services has their own page as well.
What a fantastic promo, and just great networking job there, Rachel. Thank
you.
Yeah, and Lighthouse Writers, if folks who don't know Lighthouse, that's just its whole other world of really thoughtful, brilliant teachers and people who hang around there. We are Denver's, the whole Front Range, lucky to have so many wonderful writing organizations up and down. So
absolutely
very lucky. Yeah. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for your time on the podcast. And we wish you well, and been really insightful and just a great conversation. I've enjoyed it immensely. So thank you.
Thank you. I did as well. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And I hope this will generate more connections with RMFW folks through social media. So.